Cursed by a jealous stepmother, the Omega hid her face until the Alpha King made an offer. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. Elena Wright learned early how to make herself smaller than the room she lived in, how to walk softly across old wooden floors so no one would turn and look too closely, how to breathe in a way that left no trace. The house at the edge of the territory stood less than a mile from the forest line, but it felt farther from the world than any place Elena had ever known. By day, sunlight filtered through narrow windows, catching dust in the air like tiny, suspended stars, and by night, the moonlight pressed against the walls as if searching for her. She never let it find her face. A pale scarf, always tied with careful hands, hid what her stepmother called a curse, a mark of shame whispered into existence by jealousy and sealed by cruelty. Margaret Wright liked to remind her that some things were better unseen, that silence was a form of obedience, and that gratitude meant never asking why. Elena obeyed, not because she believed the words, but because surviving sometimes meant choosing stillness over resistance. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the house slept and the world felt briefly forgiving, she would step outside, counting the boards of the porch, measuring the night by the sound of distant owls and the slow rhythm of her own heart. She was an Omega, yes, but she was also observant, kind in ways that left no fingerprints, steady in ways no one bothered to notice. When the announcement came that the Alpha King would visit the territory to review the unmated Omegas, the air itself seemed to tighten. Margaret's voice sharpened with excitement, plans unfolding in clipped instructions, while Elena listened from the hallway, fingers resting at her throat, feeling the familiar weight of the scarf. She was told where to stand, when to move, and most importantly, when not to be seen. Behind curtains, behind others, behind expectations that had never been hers. On the morning of preparations, Elena found a small gray wolf resting near the back of the hall, breathing shallowly, overlooked by the rush. She knelt, careful and quiet, offering water and patience. Nothing more, nothing dramatic, just the kind of attention that asks for nothing in return. Somewhere beyond the tall doors, the world gathered its breath. The Alpha King's arrival would soon echo through the halls, boots crossing stone, voices lowering, eyes lifting. Elena adjusted her scarf, not from fear, but from habit, unaware that habits sometimes end the moment destiny decides to notice what has been standing quietly all along. The hours before the Alpha King's arrival unfolded with a quiet intensity that pressed against Elena Wright's senses like a change in the weather. The house filled with movement that did not include her, footsteps crossing rooms she was told not to enter, voices lowering when she passed, eyes sliding away, as if acknowledging her presence required too much effort. Margaret Wright oversaw everything with precise satisfaction, directing servants, correcting postures, adjusting fabrics, all while reminding Elena with a glance that her place was not among the chosen. Elena did not argue. She folded her hands, tied her scarf with the same careful knot she had practiced for years, and listened. She listened to the way anticipation carried a sharper edge than fear, to the way people spoke of the Alpha King as if he were not a man but a force of nature, inevitable and unquestioned. Outside, the sky shifted slowly from gray to blue, and the forest answered with distant birdsong, steady and unconcerned with hierarchy. Elena took comfort in that. She was instructed to remain behind the inner curtain during the review, close enough to hear, but far enough to be forgotten. Margaret's voice was firm when she gave the order, leaving no room for discussion. Elena nodded once and stepped where she was told, the fabric brushing her sleeves as the curtain settled, creating a narrow world of shadow and filtered light. From there, she could see shapes without faces, movement without meaning, and she focused on her breathing, counting each inhale, each exhale, grounding herself in the present moment. She reminded herself that this was not new. She had lived most of her life one step removed from the center of things, watching choices being made by others, learning which silences were safer than words. Yet something felt different that morning, as if the air itself carried a question no one else could hear. When the distant sound of approaching horses reached the house, conversation stopped mid-sentence, and a hush settled that felt deliberate rather than accidental. Elena felt it ripple through her, a subtle awareness that tightened at her chest, not fear, but attention. She thought of the small gray wolf she had helped earlier, of the warmth that had returned to its eyes, of how kindness often went unseen but never truly disappeared. As the doors opened and voices rose in formal greeting, Elena remained still, her presence hidden, her face covered, her senses alert. She noticed details others missed, the way the floor seemed to hold the echo of heavy steps, the way the scent in the room shifted, crisp and unfamiliar, like winter air carried indoors. Someone important had arrived. Margaret's voice took on a practiced tone, smooth and welcoming, and Elena could imagine the posture she wore, the smile she presented, the story she was ready to tell. Behind the curtain, Elena rested her hand lightly against the fabric, steadying herself. She did not know why her heart beat faster, only that it did, responding to something beyond sight. She wondered, briefly, what it would be like to stand openly in the room, to be seen without explanation or apology, and the thought surprised her with its clarity. The curtain remained between her and the world, but for the first time, Elena sensed that it might not always be enough to keep her invisible. From behind the curtain, Elena felt the room rearrange itself around a presence she could not see but could sense with startling clarity. The Alpha King did not need to announce himself loudly to command attention. The shift came in smaller ways, in the way conversation softened, in the way even confident voices chose their words more carefully, in the way the air seemed to cool, as if the windows had been opened to a higher altitude. Elena remained still, her posture calm, though her awareness sharpened. She noticed how her heartbeat settled into a slower rhythm, not from fear, but from an instinctive focus she had never experienced before. Beyond the curtain, names were spoken, introductions offered, compliments exchanged with practiced ease. Margaret's voice rose and fell with controlled warmth, presenting her household as polished and orderly, her pride carefully displayed. Elena listened without judgment, absorbing the cadence of the exchange, the unspoken rules beneath the words. When the Alpha King spoke, it was not often, but when he did, the sound carried weight without effort, steady and measured, the voice of someone accustomed to being heard without raising it. Elena could not see his expression, yet she felt the subtle pauses that followed his questions, as if he noticed details others overlooked. The review continued, one Omega at a time stepping forward, offering rehearsed answers, careful smiles, and practiced confidence. Elena sensed the tension in the room rise and fall with each presentation, expectation building and releasing like a held breath. From her place in the shadows, she observed patterns, how approval was sought openly, how worth was measured quickly, how certain qualities were praised while others went unnoticed. She adjusted the edge of her scarf, a small movement meant only to ground herself, and was surprised to find that her hands were steady. A faint memory surfaced, the warmth of the small wolf earlier that day, the way it had leaned into her touch without hesitation, responding to quiet reassurance rather than command. The thought lingered, gentle and grounding. As the final introductions concluded, a brief silence settled, longer than etiquette required. Elena felt it before she understood it, a subtle pull of attention, as if something in the room had shifted direction. She resisted the instinct to lean forward, remaining exactly where she was. Yet her senses told her that the Alpha King had not turned away as expected. Instead, his focus seemed to rest, curious and unhurried, on the space behind the curtain. Elena's breath caught for a fraction of a second before she willed it steady again. She had been invisible for so long that the idea of being noticed felt unreal, like stepping into a reflection that did not belong to her. Margaret spoke again, filling the silence with polite explanation, offering reasons without being asked, her tone too quick, too eager. Elena did not hear the words clearly, only the strain beneath them. The Alpha King did not respond immediately. The pause stretched, not uncomfortable, but deliberate, and in that space, Elena felt something unfold, a quiet acknowledgement that did not require sight. She stood straight, Her shoulders relaxed, her presence contained but whole, as if instinctively preparing for a moment she had never been allowed to imagine. Whatever came next, she sensed, would not be decided by appearances alone. The silence that followed stretched just long enough to feel intentional, and Elena sensed that it was not meant to be filled by anyone else. From her place behind the curtain, she felt the tension settle like a steady weight, not pressing down but anchoring the moment. The Alpha King had not spoken, yet the room seemed to wait for him, breath held, manners suspended. Elena did not move, though every instinct urged awareness, and she focused instead on the quiet discipline she had learned over years of restraint. She listened to the subtle sounds that revealed more than words, the faint shift of fabric as someone adjusted their stance, the controlled stillness of those who did not dare interrupt. Margaret's composure faltered just enough for Elena to notice, a tightening beneath polished confidence, the kind that appeared when control was threatened by curiosity. The Alpha King's gaze, unseen yet unmistakable, remained fixed on the space Elena occupied, and she felt the strange certainty that he was not guessing. He was assessing, with patience rather than judgment. When he finally spoke, it was not to demand an explanation, but to ask a simple question, measured and calm, directed toward the household rather than any single person. The tone carried interest rather than suspicion, and Elena recognized it as genuine. Margaret responded quickly, her words smooth, her explanation careful, offering a version of the truth that avoided detail while implying necessity. Elena listened, understanding the shape of the answer even when the specifics blurred, and she felt an unexpected clarity rise within her. She realized that, for once, the narrative being offered did not define her entirely. The Alpha King did not immediately accept the explanation. He allowed a pause to follow, thoughtful rather than dismissive, and Elena sensed that he was listening for what was not said. The moment felt balanced on a narrow edge, quiet but charged, as if the room itself recognized the possibility of change. Elena's hand rested lightly against her scarf, not to adjust it, but to remind herself that she was present, that she existed beyond the boundaries others set. The Alpha King shifted his attention briefly, acknowledging the others in the room with courtesy, yet the connection did not fully break. It lingered, steady and deliberate, returning again to the hidden space behind the curtain. Elena felt no fear, only a calm alertness, the kind that comes when something long anticipated finally approaches. She thought again of the small wolf, of how it had trusted without seeing, responding to tone and intent rather than appearance. The memory steadied her. When the Alpha King spoke again, his words were directed clearly, respectfully, requesting that all who were present be accounted for, without exception. It was not a command edged with authority, but an invitation that carried expectation. The room shifted in response, murmurs rippling softly before settling. Margaret hesitated, just for a heartbeat, and in that hesitation, Elena understood that a door had opened. She remained where she was, posture composed, ready but unassuming, allowing events to unfold without forcing them. She sensed that whatever came next would not require her to speak loudly or step forward unbidden. For the first time, the choice to be seen might not be hers to make alone, and that realization carried a quiet strength she had never been taught to claim. The request landed softly, yet it changed the atmosphere more than any raised voice could have. Elena felt it ripple outward, the Alpha King's expectations settling into the room like a steady tide, and she sensed the careful recalibration that followed as everyone adjusted to a new center of gravity. Margaret's reply came a fraction too late, polite words arranged with haste, explaining procedures and propriety, suggesting delays that sounded reasonable but felt defensive. Elena listened, recognizing the pattern of control she had lived under for years, the way choices were framed as necessities rather than preferences. The Alpha King did not interrupt. He listened with patience that felt intentional, his silence neither approval nor dismissal, simply space given for truth to surface. Elena remained still behind the curtain, her presence contained, her attention focused. She felt the room watch Margaret, felt the subtle shift as curiosity replaced assumption. The Alpha King acknowledged the explanation with a brief nod, then redirected the moment without confrontation, asking for clarity with calm precision. It was not an order, but it carried certainty, and Elena understood that the conversation had moved beyond convenience. The hush that followed was different now, edged with anticipation rather than formality. Elena became acutely aware of her own breathing, the texture of the fabric at her throat, the steady beat of her heart. She realized that the space she occupied was no longer merely hidden. It was acknowledged, defined by the absence that others had begun to notice. When Margaret attempted to steer attention elsewhere, offering additional introductions, the Alpha King allowed the gesture but did not fully follow it. His focus returned, unhurried, to the unanswered presence. Elena sensed that he was not seeking spectacle. He was seeking completeness. The thought steadied her. She remembered the discipline of restraint, the years of learning how to exist without demanding recognition, and she drew on that quiet strength now. She did not step forward. She did not speak. She allowed the moment to breathe. The Alpha King addressed the room again, his words courteous and inclusive, stating that every household carried stories that deserved to be heard, and that no review was complete while one remained untold. The phrasing was careful, respectful, and it resonated through the space like a gentle challenge. Elena felt something loosen within her, not fear, but the tension of being prepared to disappear. Around her, murmurs stirred, then settled, as people recalculated what they thought they understood. Margaret's composure tightened, her smile held a fraction too long, and Elena recognized the edge of resistance there, not anger, but the discomfort of losing narrative control. The Alpha King did not press. He waited, allowing time to do what pressure could not. In that waiting, Elena felt seen without exposure, acknowledged without demand. She sensed that the balance of the room had shifted decisively, and that whatever came next would unfold in the open. She stood straight, shoulders relaxed, scarf still in place, and trusted that silence could be as revealing as any declaration. The Alpha King's attention remained steady, patient, and Elena understood that the escalation did not require urgency. It required presence. The room, once arranged around appearances, now revolved around a question that could no longer be ignored, and Elena felt ready, not to reveal herself, but to be counted. The moment stretched until it felt suspended, as if time itself had agreed to wait, and Elena sensed that the decision unfolding no longer belonged to the room, but to the Alpha King alone. He shifted his stance slightly, a small movement that nevertheless drew attention, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a new intention, not louder, but clearer, directed with precision toward the space behind the curtain. He did not demand that the hidden presence step forward. Instead, he addressed the absence itself, acknowledging it openly, stating that what was concealed was not automatically diminished, and that what endured restraint often carried uncommon strength. The words did not accuse, nor did they flatter. They observed. Elena felt them settle within her, steadying her thoughts rather than stirring them. She became acutely aware that the room had turned toward listening, not to her voice, but to his recognition of her existence. Margaret responded with careful caution, offering reassurances that sounded practiced, insisting that all had been presented as required, that no one essential had been overlooked. The Alpha King accepted the statement without argument, then asked a question that was simple in structure but profound in implication, wondering aloud whether completeness could be defined by tradition alone. The inquiry did not challenge authority. It expanded it. Elena felt a quiet shift within herself, an understanding that the boundaries she had lived inside were not universal laws, but choices reinforced by habit. The Alpha King allowed his gaze to linger, unseen yet unmistakable, on the curtain once more, and in that attention, Elena sensed respect rather than curiosity. He spoke again, this time offering context rather than command, explaining that leadership required discernment beyond appearances, that his role demanded he recognize potential where others might not look. The room absorbed the statement in silence, recalibrating expectations in real time. Elena did not move. She felt no urgency to reveal herself, no pressure to justify her presence. The Alpha King had not asked for proof. He had extended consideration. When he finally made his intention known, it was framed as an offer rather than a decree, a possibility rather than a conclusion. He stated that he wished to speak with the one who remained unseen, privately if necessary, on terms that preserved dignity and choice. The phrasing was deliberate, leaving room for consent, and Elena felt the significance of that allowance resonate through her. Margaret stiffened, the shift subtle but unmistakable, and the room noticed. The Alpha King acknowledged the reaction with a calm glance, neither confrontational nor dismissive, simply aware. Elena felt a quiet certainty rise within her, not fear, not triumph, but readiness. The offer had been made without spectacle, without exposure, grounded in respect rather than demand. She understood that the moment did not require immediate action, only acknowledgement. The Alpha King waited, not impatiently, but with the confidence of someone who understood the value of timing. Elena rested her hand against the curtain, feeling its texture, its thinness, and recognized that it no longer defined her position. The world beyond had shifted, and she had been included without being summoned. In that recognition, she found a calm she had never known, a sense that whatever choice came next would be hers to accept or refuse, and that, for the first time, the possibility of being seen did not require surrender. The room seemed to exhale as the Alpha King's offer settled into shared awareness, and Elena felt the subtle but undeniable shift that followed when possibility became real. She remained behind the curtain, yet the distance no longer felt like exile. It felt intentional, respected. The Alpha King did not look away or press further. He simply waited, allowing the weight of choice to rest where it belonged. Elena sensed the room watching the stillness itself, measuring what courage looked like when it did not announce itself. Margaret broke the quiet with a carefully controlled response, her words polite, almost agreeable, yet threaded with urgency, as if she hoped momentum alone might carry the moment past the unseen complication. The Alpha King listened without interruption, then answered with calm assurance, stating that leadership was not maintained by speed, but by discernment, and that discernment required attention to what others preferred to overlook. His words were not sharp, but they were precise, and Elena felt them align with something steady inside her. She realized that the offer was not a test. It was an opening. The Alpha King clarified his intention, addressing the room openly now, explaining that he wished to extend an opportunity to the Omega who had remained unseen, not as an obligation, but as a consideration worthy of respect. The phrasing was deliberate, ensuring that the power of the moment did not strip choice from the one it concerned. Elena felt a quiet resolve settle over her, not urgency, not fear, but an understanding that the moment had arrived because she was ready to meet it. She stepped closer to the curtain, not crossing it, simply acknowledging her proximity to the world beyond. The movement was small, yet it carried significance, and she sensed the Alpha King register it immediately. He responded by shifting his stance, aligning himself more fully with the space she occupied, signaling attention without demand. The room followed his lead, awareness narrowing, expectation sharpening. Elena took a steady breath, her hand resting briefly at her throat, feeling the familiar fabric beneath her fingers, then letting her hand fall. She did not remove the scarf. She did not step forward. She allowed herself to be present without alteration. The Alpha King spoke again, his voice steady, offering reassurance rather than instruction, stating that whatever conversation followed would occur with discretion and respect, and that no one would be compelled to reveal more than they chose. The words carried authority tempered by care, and Elena felt their truth resonate. Margaret's composure tightened further, the shift subtle but noticeable now, and Elena recognized that the balance of influence had moved beyond her reach. The Alpha King concluded his statement by formally extending the offer, making it clear that it stood regardless of immediate response, that time would be granted where time was needed. The room absorbed this in silence, the magnitude of restraint evident. Elena understood that this was the turning point, not marked by spectacle, but by intention. She remained still, allowing the offer to exist without rushing to meet it, trusting that dignity did not require haste. In that stillness, she felt seen in a way she never had before, not for what she concealed, but for what she carried quietly within, and she knew that whatever path unfolded next would be shaped not by fear or force, but by choice freely given. Elena felt the moment reach a quiet threshold, one where silence no longer served as shelter, but as acknowledgement. She remained behind the curtain for several heartbeats longer, not out of hesitation, but intention, allowing the weight of the Alpha King's offer to settle fully into her awareness. Then, with measured calm, she stepped just far enough forward that the edge of the curtain no longer concealed her presence entirely. She did not emerge into full view, nor did she retreat. The movement was subtle, but it changed everything. The room responded instantly, attention sharpening, breaths held, yet no one spoke. The Alpha King shifted his focus to meet the space she now occupied, his posture relaxed but attentive, signaling that he saw the choice she was making. Elena lifted her chin slightly, not in defiance, but in quiet resolve, and spoke for the first time, her voice steady, clear, and unhurried. She acknowledged the offer without embellishment, expressing gratitude not for the attention itself, but for the respect with which it had been given. The simplicity of her words carried weight, grounded in sincerity rather than performance. The Alpha King listened without interruption, his expression composed, his attention undivided. When she finished, the room remained silent, absorbing the sound of a voice they had never been meant to hear. Margaret's reaction was immediate yet restrained, her surprise carefully masked behind practiced composure, though the tension in her stance betrayed discomfort. The Alpha King responded to Elena directly, his tone calm and affirming, acknowledging her presence openly now, not as an exception, but as a certainty that had simply waited its turn. He assured her that the offer stood as stated, that no explanation was required beyond what she wished to share, and that dignity would remain intact regardless of her choice. Elena felt the reassurance settle within her, easing something she had carried for years. She did not remove her scarf. No one asked her to. The Alpha King made no request for proof or revelation, and in that restraint, Elena felt a deeper form of recognition take shape. He addressed the room briefly, clarifying that consideration was not favor, and that inclusion was not indulgence, but responsibility. His words reframed the moment without accusation, redirecting the collective understanding with quiet authority. Elena sensed the shift ripple outward, recalibrating assumptions she had never been allowed to challenge. When the Alpha King turned his attention back to her, his gaze held neither expectation nor pressure, only openness. He stated that a private conversation would be arranged at her discretion, and that the matter would proceed only if she wished it to. Elena inclined her head slightly, accepting the respect offered, and in doing so, felt a subtle release, as if a long-held breath had finally been allowed to end. The room seemed different now, not because of what had been revealed, but because of what had been acknowledged. Elena remained where she was, no longer hidden, not fully revealed, but unmistakably present. She felt no urgency to move further, no need to justify her existence. The Alpha King's offer had created space, and within that space, Elena recognized her own steadiness. Whatever followed would not erase her past, but it would no longer be defined by it. For the first time, the future felt like something she could step toward without leaving herself behind. The gathering concluded without ceremony, yet the weight of what had occurred lingered in every measured movement and careful silence as the Alpha King prepared to depart. Elena remained where she was, neither retreating nor advancing, grounded in the quiet certainty that something irreversible had shifted. The room no longer arranged itself around avoidance, but around acknowledgement, and even as conversations resumed in muted tones, the absence of dismissal spoke louder than any declaration. The Alpha King addressed the household one final time, his words composed and precise, expressing appreciation for their hospitality and stating that further correspondence would follow through formal channels. There was no spectacle, no pronouncement designed to impress, only clarity delivered with calm authority. As he turned to leave, his attention returned briefly to Elena, not to summon her, but to reaffirm that the offer extended remained open, unchanged by time or distance. The acknowledgement was subtle, understood rather than displayed, and Elena inclined her head in response, accepting the assurance without spectacle. Margaret stood rigid, her expression carefully neutral, yet the tension in her posture revealed a recalibration she could not prevent. The balance she had maintained through control and silence had been disrupted, not by confrontation, but by recognition, and Elena understood that this shift would echo beyond the room. As footsteps receded and the presence that had altered the air withdrew, the space felt larger, as if walls had moved outward. Elena remained composed, aware that eyes lingered where they once slid away, not with scrutiny, but with reconsideration. She did not remove her scarf. She did not need to. The meaning of concealment had changed, no longer a symbol of exclusion, but a choice she retained. When the room finally emptied, Elena stepped back into the quiet corridor, the familiar shadows no longer pressing in as they once had. She moved with unhurried calm, her senses attuned to the subtle aftereffects of the encounter, understanding that resolution did not arrive all at once, but unfolded through intention. In time, outside, the light had shifted, afternoon stretching toward evening, and Elena paused near an open window, feeling the air against her skin, steady and real. She thought of the Alpha King's restraint, of the care with which authority had been exercised, and recognized that true power did not demand immediate allegiance. It offered space. As she turned away, Elena felt no rush to define what came next. The future had not been promised, but it had been acknowledged, and that was enough. She understood that the path ahead would require courage of a different kind, not the endurance of silence, but the willingness to be counted without apology. In the quiet that followed, Elena felt something settle into place, not triumph, not relief, but alignment. She had not been rescued, nor had she been revealed. She had been seen, and that recognition, offered without condition, marked the beginning of a story no longer shaped by concealment alone. Whatever awaited her beyond the walls of the house, beyond the reach of old narratives, would unfold with dignity intact. The moment had passed, but its meaning remained, steady and undeniable, like a promise spoken softly and kept.